Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As you'll see, we're in the Mission Hospice Library. I believe you could see it in the background here. We've got Dr. Kerr's name over in the corner. We've got a fireplace going, so we're thankful that you've joined us tonight. My name is Elijah Marquez, and I'm the Community Education Manager at Mission Hospice and Home Care. Mission Hospice is a nonprofit hospice serving the San Francisco Peninsula and South Bay area for well over 40 years. At Mission Hospice, we believe that everyone in the last phase of their life deserves care that's aligned with their beliefs, wishes, and values. We are also committed to providing personalized education, such as tonight's program, as well as transitions, hospice, and palliative care services. And this is to all members of our community, regardless of insurance status or anything of that nature. We do consider everyone in our community to be somebody that we would love to serve. You can learn more and visit our website at missionhospice.org. Also, if you'd like to watch this recording again once it's published in about early December, or recordings of many of our other really incredible educational programs, you can visit Mission Hospice's YouTube page. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's author. Dr. Christopher Kerr is the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Executive Officer at Hospice and Palliative Care Buffalo. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, Chris earned his MD as well as his PhD in neurobiology. Outside of direct patient care, Chris's focus is in the area of patient advocacy. And he is passionate about palliative care and the belief that such care should be throughout the continuum of illness. Under Chris's medical leadership, Hospice Buffalo now serves over 1,100 patients a day, which is absolutely incredible, half of whom receive services prior to being on hospice. Chris's background in research has evolved from bench science towards the human experience of illness, has witnessed from the bedside. Specifically, what we'll be talking about today, patients' dreams and visions at end of life. Although medically ignored, these near universal experiences often provide comfort and meaning, as well as insight into the life and the death anticipated. To date, the research team at Hospice Buffalo has published multiple studies on this topic and documented over 1,500 end-of-life events, many of which are videotaped, and I believe Chris will be showing us some of those tonight as well. This work was the subject of his TEDx Buffalo talk, which has been viewed over 4.6 million times. I suggest watching that, it's very incredible. It has been the subject of reports across multiple acclaimed news sources. It's featured in a recent documentary, if you have Netflix, called Surviving Death, and PBS World Channel documentary called Death is But a Dream. And most recently, Chris's work has been published in a book. Let me see if I can hold it up for all of you. This is called Death is But a Dream, and it was published in 2020 and came out in multiple languages for anyone who's interested. So if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Kerr's work or the work of his team, what you can do is visit his website at drchristopherkerr.com, and I will put that in the chat just momentarily. Let me let a couple more people in there. And before I pass the library stage over to Dr. Kerr, I wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Chris, for being here to share some of your amazing research. He will be taking some questions at the end of the presentation. So if anyone thinks of anything they don't want to lose, throw it in the chat and I will bring it up at the end. Or if you'd like to ask him yourself, we will invite some people to the virtual stage. So save your questions if you'd like to do that. And let's kick off the author talk tonight. Welcome, Dr. Kerr.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm just going to share the screen here. Is that showing up okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, now I can't see you guys again. Let me try one thing.
You want me to walk through it real quick?
Yeah, was it show video panel?
It is. So if you go to the little toolbar and then hit more. Oh, you got it? Perfect.
Okay, I got it.
See, now we're tech experts.
Yeah, hardly. It's just such an awful thing talking to a blank screen.
Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting, your history. So we're around the same age. I think we were founded in 78. So you probably were within the top 10 earliest hospice, is that right?
We have been around, I believe, Oh, this is a quiz now. If I say it wrong, nobody quote me. I think it was 1976 or 74.
Yeah, so you were in the top 10. Just for
Mhm.
reference for people, we were in that same range, and now there's over 6,000. So we're connecting two of the pioneering hospices in the country. So it's wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's late here in Buffalo, but I'll try to stay plugged in. This research really has kind of an interesting trajectory. The quick story is that I wasn't naturally drawn to this at all, which probably makes me a good messenger because I'm the last person in the church, sort of thing. What happened was I was a physician. I was a cardiology fellow and moonlighting at hospice. And there was nothing in my training, obviously, that prepared me to care for the dying. We viewed dying as medical failure, and we treated patients in an organ system-based model. When of course dying is so much more. It's a closing of a life, and people die in totality. So there is lots more than what you do to somebody. And I had to learn more or less to be present. And when that happened, I was struck that people were having these very inner experiences. I didn't understand it. I didn't know the etiology, but I learned to have some degree of reverence because it was clearly therapeutic for the patients as well as their loved ones. And it was really the nurses and social workers and chaplains who kind of brought me to the bedside. And to them, it was just a thing, which I'm sure many of you I'm preaching to the choir. Then what happened was I was trying to teach this to students and residents, that there was this other aspect of dying. There was, the part we see, this physical decline and the symptom issues and all of that. But then there was the patient's experience, which was so much richer, their view from the bed. And it was very hard to get people to consider things that couldn't be measured or imaged, etc., that just were experiential. And the response I usually got was, well, there's no evidence for this, which is not really true, because it's always been discussed across time and cultures. And I'll discuss some of that later, but in the language of physicians, it wasn't evidence-based. So that's what really drove the research. And the funny part of the research, we never thought anyone would care. And we were kind of right. We heard absolutely nothing within the medical community. We published probably 7 or 8 manuscripts over the years. But it leaked into the non-medical world, and it went around the world, and it's still going. So it's very interesting that there's receptivity, that people really want to reclaim the dying experience as something larger than a medical problem to solve or failure to solve. And that the people who are actually experiencing this or caring for loved ones are understanding that there's more there. So again, what we're referring to, these subjective experiences, we refer to them as dreams and visions, which really isn't very accurate, because if you have patients themselves typically say, no, you don't understand, this wasn't a dream, this was a happening, it was an experience. And they'll say things like, I don't normally dream or recall my dreams. So there's something else. And we'll talk about the vision piece as well. So sometimes I'll refer to them as end of life experiences, but the closest nomenclature we have in relative health is this idea of a dream-like experience. And again, what's so powerful that I hope to demonstrate is how remarkably therapeutic these are for the patients and for their loved ones. One of the interesting things that we did in our research is, I knew the medical community would have a hard time accepting this. And I knew I could never do justice to what the patients were actually telling me. So we got a little camera and we started videotaping patients. And the ironic part of that is that's a lot of what you're going to see tonight. And that's what ended up on Netflix and PBS, was what we were just to kind of take pictures of to make a case to physicians. But I'm going to try to explain our research, but really do it in the context of the patients themselves. And I think they capture it best. So the first video is of our patient, Genie, and her daughter, Julie. Where possible, I'm trying to show the loved one as well. And you're going to notice a couple of things. First of all, Genie describes these experiences in very rich detail. They're very vivid. They're easily recalled. They're described as near virtual. They're also fascinating, and they're just common themes. Is very, very little is said between the people in the dreams, but everything seems to be clearly understood or felt. In all of these experiences, what's fascinating is the notion of mortality or of dying, of finality, is really not denied at all. It really isn't the issue. The experience almost seems to transcend the dying experience. Instead, what it does is validate our greatest accomplishments, which are our relationships. So life is affirmed. It's not about denying death. And in really affirming life and being comforted, the fear of death seems to be diminished, and that is palpable. And if I had one wish that I hope you walk away with tonight, it's this: I hope we reset what the patient experiences is of dying, which is not evoked fear or dread, but something else that again seems to affirm the life that was led. And finally, what you'll notice is that the closer patients are to dying, the more these inner experiences are populated by people who they've loved and who have typically passed. And that actually increases, these experiences increase in frequency as people get closer to death, and seeing the deceased becomes more often the theme. What we did is we actually interviewed people every day in our first study, and every day up until death, because we wanted to see the process, the change over time. Dying is an adaptation. It's not a static state, obviously. So what were these changes? And what we found is it was a dramatic increase in frequency. Nearly 90% of people reported at least one event. And I think that's one thing we did. Our research isn't typically that innovative. Everything we do, we were basically trying to demonstrate what we already knew. But one thing we got right was measuring this every day, because we were really able to capture a lot of these events. So this is Genie.
Dr. Chris, before you jump into the video, there are some squares that are showing up on our end. I was giving it a moment to see if they went away. Down across the bottom and then the right side, there are some little pop-up squares. I'm not sure if it's perhaps the settings in your PowerPoint presentation, but maybe you could make it small screen and then do the play PowerPoint again.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you can see them on your end.
No, I don't see it at all. So do you want me to exit out entirely?
That might be a good option. We'll see if it works.
Okay. Well, if anyone can screw this up, I'm telling you.
I know you can't even see them. That's the hard part. It's like troubleshooting a ghost.
Are they still there?
They are, but when you play it out of this view, I know it's not optimal. Nothing is blocked. Let's give it another second.
What's that?
So we have a little square across the bottom. I think I'm okay with it because it doesn't block as much as it did previously. But if there are any words on the bottom of your screen, you might just have to read those aloud to us.
Okay.
Unless you prefer to show it in that smaller screen without hitting the play presentation button.
Smaller. I'm sorry, the smaller screen.
If you just open the first screen that you had up before you made the presentation large.
This one?
Yes, so you could play it like that. We could see the whole PowerPoint in this view, just a little bit smaller.
How's that?
I think that is perfect on my end. There's still a little black box on the bottom, but it's not impeding the view at all. If you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, perfect. Otherwise, I'm not really sure how to get rid of that, unfortunately.
Okay, I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Here's Genie.
I think more and more people are getting a little bit more hip to dreams than they were before.
When I think of my mother, I just think of a really vivacious, energetic. She was the type of person that when she walked into a room, it lit up. So when I walked in one morning, she said, I had the most amazing dream. And I said, tell me about it. And she said it was so detailed and so real that she felt that it was actually happening.
I was laying in bed and people were walking very slowly by me. The right-hand side, I didn't know, but they were all very friendly and they touched my arm or my hand when they went by. But the other side were people that I knew. My mom and dad were there, my uncle. Everybody I knew that was dead was there. And they passed and did the same thing.
She described this as more of an event that she would believe almost happened. She knew that she didn't believe it happened because she woke up and she was at home, but she said it was as if she were in a different place.
Boy, I remember seeing every piece of their face. And I mean, I know that was my mom and dad and uncle and my brother-in-law.
That dream and her successive dreams and experiences made her feel comforted.
I felt good. I felt good to see some people. And the other ones didn't bother me either. I have seen my mother recently more. I can't say that my mother and I got along all those years, but we made up for it at the end.
And she said to me, I'm not crazy, Jewel. And I said, I don't think you are, Mom. It's okay.
When I told my family that I was happy about it, and that's what they asked. How does it make you feel? Well, I feel good about it.
I feel the comfort and the peace that some of these experiences brought to her gave her exactly what she needed to pass on. For me, it affirmed that you're not alone when you die.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but one thing that's clear is that this isn't delirium. This isn't confusional states. And that's one of the things I have found medically is clinically, we so want to put this in a box. Medicine has trouble with questions of the mind as opposed to the brain. And so the delirium or confusional states is this big bucket we put things into that may not be our shared experience. The part of this university approved study is that we had to get consent and it had to be witnessed. We also screened for delirium. But if you've seen delirium, you know when you see it, obviously she's incredibly intact, she's acutely aware, she's insightful. Thematically, these experiences are very organized, unlike delirious states that are often tangential and horrific. Most importantly is how the patient's left felt. Delirium typically causes agitation and fear, whereas that's not what the experience she's describing. The other thing that's important is the vantage point. So, you know, people could say, well, this is a deoxygenated brain, etc. We're often days, weeks, months upstream. These people are living alone. They may be driving their car. We're not talking about the moments before death. Altered mental states are obviously common in the dying process, but that's not the patients that I'm going to show you tonight. The next patient is a lovely woman named Florence, and this video was taken 5 days before she passed. As I mentioned, the frequency of these events increased as you get closer to dying, and typically they center on people who have passed, but there's this really fascinating editing process. So it tends to focus on people who loved us and secured us best, and exclude people who conditioned their love, withheld their love, complicated their love. It tends to really focus on those most meaningful relationships. And time and distance seem to be irrelevant. So you can be 95 years old, and it's your mother you saw who passed maybe when you were 5, and it's her voice you hear and her perfume you smell. So that's where we get anchored, and it's this idea of kind of being put back together at the very end of your life. What's also very interesting, and this is completely opposite of near-death experience, which is kind of this trial run and dying, where people seem to come out of it structurally changed with a message or a need to do something different, etc. This isn't like that at all. There aren't great epiphanies, pronouncements, insights, those sorts of things. What it tends to do is these experiences focus on very common events of having lived. And what you'll see with Florence, it's sitting around her kitchen table and feeling that familiar presence of those that she loved most, who she's lost. So with that, I'm going to show you Florence.
Tell us about the dreams.
It's very hard to pinpoint because they were so real. In all these years, my husband's been dead and my daughter.
Okay, and when did your daughter pass?
7 years ago.
Okay, at the age of 37?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And your husband died?
61.
61, okay.
I have seen them, not their face, not their clothes, but I knew it was them. But there was nothing really remarkable to define that was Dick or John. But the other night, I fell right into a sleep. We were like sitting at the kitchen table, laughing. I could see their faces. I could tell it was their clothes. We were laughing, we were talking, we were eating. It was like a regular Sunday dinner night.
That's wonderful.
It is. And then Monday night, the same thing happened. But the same identical thing. We're laughing, we're talking, we're having a ball.
How did it make you feel?
I woke up Monday morning and I went, was that real? And I said, that was real. That was really real.
It happened.
We were sitting there as much as we were sitting here.
Okay. Have you ever had a dream that was that vivid?
No.
No. That was the most vivid dream. And we hear this a lot, and it's very hard to tell whether it's real or it's a dream. Yeah.
It made me feel like that whole 12 years had never existed.
12 years, that's interesting. 12 years since he's been gone. Okay. Because it was so real that he was there in the present.
And 7 years since my daughter was gone. Mm-hmm. It was like we were always together, never separated.
Yeah. How does it make you feel about the prospect of dying? How does it change your view?
I'm not afraid of dying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does it make you think you're going to see them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If I quit swearing.
If you what?
Quit swearing.
Oh, you're worried you're going to end up in the wrong place. I have a feeling you're okay. It's interesting that you can be in a dying process and at the same time feeling very much alive, right? And that made you feel alive.
Okay.
In case you didn't hear what she said, she says she's worried she's going to end up in the wrong place because she swears too much. So both Genie and Florence really show us, and the patients that you're going to see subsequently show us that there's this paradox in dying. So obviously they're physically declining, but emotionally, spiritually, they're actually very much alive. And really, there's important living, obviously, to do within dying, and that's actually fascinating because both women are describing this sense of being connected to their life, to the lives, the people that they love, the sense of belonging, of being integrated again. And so one of the questions we were interested in one of our studies is there growth within dying? So, I think our commonly held view is dying is this extinguishing of everything. But is that true? Non-physically, is there also other elements to this? And so we did a study where we looked at measures of what's called post-traumatic growth. So those are experiences that are typically defined by distressing or negative elements, but actually have things within them that are positive or what we associated with growth. And what we found is people who are having end-of-life experiences showed positive growth in every dimension measured. So again, they're gaining and they're adapting and they're having insight and understanding and evolving even while their life is ending, which is fascinating. So people die how they live, and none of these experiences recast the reality of the life that they led. And we've all been harmed for having lived. And what's fascinating is that some of these negative experiences are actually some of the most meaningful or the most transformative type of experiences that we were able to capture. It's really interesting. We got this wrong. We viewed it in our original study. We'd have patients click off whether these experiences were either comforting or discomforting or neither. And about 18% would say discomforting. And the connotation there is obviously negative, but that really didn't capture what was happening. What we found was that people who were having these negative experiences often got that injury addressed. So gentlemen who had PTSD for 60 years, for example, survivor's guilt, at the very end of his life, see soldiers that he was in battle with and is finally relieved of that burden. The next video is hard to watch, and I apologize for that. This gentleman's name is Dwayne, and we were actually filming him not knowing he was having any experiences at all, and he decompensates, as you can tell, while he's being filmed. He had a life that's very hard to describe, but he was born to poverty, multi-generational substance abuse. He started using crack at an early age, and he had actually spent more years in prison than out. Yet he was fascinating. He was bright. He was jovial, and he had a life that he couldn't afford to look back or with regret. He just kind of marched through it. And that created a certain lack of ownership of some of the hard points in his life and the problematic relationships. And what you'll see in the video is he finally starts to talk about this accounting, this reckoning. And he has head and neck cancer, so his disease and his lesions are in his neck, and in his very negative and powerful dream experiences, he's envisioning these being stabbed at the site of his cancer. But he wakes up from this very transformed, and he asked to see his daughter. And for the first time ever, he really addresses the things that he did wrong and makes amends. And after that, he was able to sleep peacefully, and she was by his side for several weeks. So this is Dwayne.
You know, I had a lot of good dreams that I was mad that I got woke up from, and I tried to hurry up, get back to sleep so I can get back into it, and I couldn't. You know, because it was a good one.
What were you dreaming about in those ones?
Oh, you don't want to know about that one. You don't want to know about them. My dreams, man, you know, my nightmares, I don't like them. I think it's because my past is coming back to me, you know, from doing wrong. Because I'm not going to say I'm the perfect guy when I was out there, because I was ripping running the streets, you know, doing wrong to individuals that I knew I shouldn't have been doing wrong to. Now they caught up with me. And now they know my symptoms. They know I'm sick. So now they want to try to hurt me. You know, it was like they were jigging a knife you know, trying to cut out, you know, my neck, where my cancer was at.
Right.
That's scary. It's scary to me. I'm not a bad individual, man, but I done crossed a lot of people in my life, you know, and I need help. I need help, you know. I don't want to live my life being out in society walking, have to look over my back, man. I just want people to forgive me. And please know that I was sick at the time when I was doing certain things that was hurting them and their families. You know, that's all I want. I don't want them to look at me as a bad individual because I'm not. You know, I need help. I need help.
And at that time, like, I hadn't known who got me out. I thought it was my attorney, and comes to find out it wasn't even my attorney. It was Chris. I had went and I had came through the front door, and when I turned the corner, like, he was just walking with his walker, and I said, "Hey, old man." And it was like, I guess he heard my voice and he just like froze and like stuck, and he lifted his head up and he moved that walker and he snatched away from her and he just started walking towards me all fast. And we just like stood there for, I want to say like 3-4 minutes, and we just cried, and he just like kept saying like how sorry he was and like he didn't mean it. And I just told him, "Don't worry about it. I'm home. You know, I don't even care about that." That was the longest I actually really ever hugged my dad, ever in life. Like, I've hugged my dad all the time, but standing there hugging him for that long, and like my family always, "Oh, you just worship him like he just, hello, yeah, that's my dad."
One of the challenges with doing formal studies is that you often exclude people who are cognitively different. For example, patients with dementia. Medically, you know, the nomenclature is problematic. We talk about these people in terms of their cognitive deficits, which really denies them their full personhood. And they do have rich past emotional histories and experience and memories. And these often come to surface at the end of life. The cognitive deficits don't deny their past and what they feel and what they remember and what they experience. The next video is really interesting. This is a woman named Sue, and she's talking about her 97-year-old mother named Irene, who was married to a man named Gary. And she's in a nursing facility. And what's fascinating, like so many of these patients, is as they're dying, you would expect escalating psychogenic kind of distress. And actually what she's experiencing is the best parts of having lived, and particularly focused on her deep love for her deceased husband, which becomes ever more real and palpable to her, to the point that she is trying to get out of the nursing home to go to her wedding. So at the very end of her life, she's experiencing the best day of her life.
So there was a lot of talk about, I had a dream last night and Gary was there, or Gary came to visit me, or we had dinner together. And she got to the point where she didn't even talk about it in terms of dreams. She talked about, "I had dinner with your dad and Gary last night." Wow. That was not every day, but probably 2 or 3 times a week within the last year or 6 months.
So pretty frequent.
Pretty frequent. And she was very animated about it, very happy. And she didn't even talk about them as dreams. To her, they were something that happened last night. So they made me feel wonderful, because as I was getting off the elevator and thinking, I'm wondering what we're going to talk about today, because sometimes she didn't remember what they did during the day while I was at work, or maybe who else was there, but she always remembered her dream or vision or whatever she had. When I saw her that day, I was like, Mom, why did you go outside? You never go outside. Somebody's supposed to go with you. And she looked at me like, well, I was going to meet your father. And I said, well, where were you going? How were you going to get there? And she just kind of looked around. Well, that wasn't the issue. The issue was that she was going to meet him. So then I didn't know what to say at that point. And I said, well, where were you going? And she said, well, we were going to Niagara Falls to get married. Life was different for her those last couple months because she had like something to talk about, something to look forward to. And those dreams were pepping her up, were making her happy, were making her almost look forward to go to sleep, which I think is great. Seeing that and being a part of it is a gift. And it was a gift for me. And I think it's a gift that should be shared. At the end of our life, there's a lot of spiritual, emotional work that is being done and changes that are happening that, I don't know, are we too afraid to recognize it, or you think there's not enough time or whatever. But I think it's as important, if not more important, than the physical things that we have to check off on the chart.
I think we're all familiar with this beautiful refrain by Dylan Thomas, this notion of fighting against death or the dying of the light. And it's beautiful, but it really doesn't align with what our patients are telling us. They're not fighting against anything. If anything, they're trying to fight towards. Most commonly, they're trying to reconnect with those that they've loved. This next video is of a gentleman named Horace. And a couple of things are noticeable. One is he is so overwhelmed with the sense of reclaimed love that he actually he gets very emotional, and he actually struggles to find the language. And again, where you would expect fear or distress, he's actually describing relief, unburdening, and again, being put back together.
There's this just mass green, like a pasture of green, green grass. But again, hard to describe because it was a color green that I've never seen before. It was so vivid and so, it was like lifelike. And it felt good. My wife all of a sudden appeared, and I'm thinking, well, this is even better yet. She had a certain smile about her that it was more like a joke. It was like I got you. And I'm wondering, what is the joke? What do you know? Why can't you talk to me? She just, there's just no conversation.
Yeah.
Well, she was always beautiful to me. But she was even prettier. She was. She knew me inside out. You know?
Yeah.
Or maybe that, I guess maybe words weren't necessary. We just look at each other and knew exactly what one was thinking. It was just a good time. I don't know. But everything had left you, like there was no problems. No, everything was happiness. It was like you wish the world was really felt good.
Yeah.
Felt like there was when you finish paying a bill that had been bugging you for years.
Relief.
It was that relief that it was gone. And it was, it was just a relief. Everything was okay.
Children weren't included in our formal study, but we did publish a case series, and there's a chapter in the book. We have a very large pediatric program. We probably take care of 130 children a day. And as this Dickinson poem refers to, a child's faith is new. They don't have necessarily a notion of finality or of mortality. They're in the moment. And so how does this, how is this their experience? And they may often not know somebody who has died, who could come back, but they more often than not know of an animal, if not theirs, a neighbor's, a grandparent, etc. And they don't distinguish, it seems, between the animal and the human world. And the message is the same, which that they're not alone and that they're loved. In many of these cases, and I talk about this a lot in the book, these inner experiences, just like we see in the adults, seem to inform them of where they're at. I struggled with, how to talk about these issues with children, but they seem to gather a sense, and some of this is clearly from what they're experiencing when their eyes are closed. This next video is of a 13-year-old patient I took care of named Jessica. And she passed not long after this video was taken. And she's going to talk about her deceased dog, Shadow, who comes with a message. But again, like so many of our patients, there's the fear or concern that is often addressed. And for her, it was, who is she with, how is she without her mother? And as you'll hear her describe, she sees her mother's friend in her mother's room.
Mary is my mom's, one of her best friends that she passed away from leukemia. And
how long ago?
2005.
Okay.
And I think I was pretty close to her. And she was very close to my mom. She was nice. And what happened was I seen her in my mom's room, and I was just coming up the stairs and going into my room, but I stopped because I seen something at the corner of my eye, and she was playing with my mom's curtains, and she had her favorite shirt on. My mom told me, because I told my mom it was gray and blue checkered shirt, like a flannel shirt that she had on. And she was playing with her curtains, and my mom's phone was charging, and she was looking down at my mom's phone, and I told my mom that, and my mom was pretty shocked, and I said, see, she's probably happy that you did a good thing, and she's coming to say hi. And I had a feeling that she was just coming to tell me that you're going to be okay, everything's fine, but she didn't look at me. She was just looking, but I had a feeling if I called out her name, she would look at me, but I didn't want to scare my mom.
How did it make you feel? What did you get from her? What did you feel from seeing her?
I felt a sign of relief
Yeah.
and happiness because she was a very strong person, and I know that I'm strong, and my mom tells me all the time that I'm like her.
And you told me that you thought that, oh Mom, I saw an angel. That's how you
And I
said you
thought
felt,
I
and you
saw an
felt
angel.
peace, and then
I
you were
felt
able to go to
peace.
sleep.
And then I was able to go to sleep.
So it was really comforting.
That was comforting, yes.
You weren't afraid.
I wasn't afraid of it at all. My dreams that I have are good dreams now, which I dream about my old dog Shadow that has passed away, and I see him, and he's in a good place, and he's running, he's having fun, but then again he runs away, and I never see him again. I feel like it's his meaning of saying goodbye. I have an occasionally where he comes to see me, to I have a feeling to have him say it's okay, that I'm in a safe place, and
He comes with a meaning for you, and that meaning
we
is.
were close.
And
Even though I didn't like him half the time because he would always be on my butt, but I still loved him. Yes, I do have to sort out what's real and what's imagined. I usually just try to lay there in my bed and try to reenact that dream and just think about what just had happened to wake me up.
Yes.
But I do get afraid because I see how dark my room is, and I look on the ground, and the one night I happened to see a long black thing, and that was him by my bed. Yeah, and then I went down to the ground and went like that, and it looked like his head went up, and then he was gone.
Okay. So you do things when you wake up to check to see.
If they're really there.
Yeah.
I feel that meaning is meaning of love, and that they're there and they're always going to protect you.
It's funny because he doesn't say anything to you.
No, dogs don't talk.
No, but dogs give messages.
Yeah, they give you a message of heal and love that you're okay.
Okay. So that's Shadow.
That's Shadow.
In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip ahead a few slides. So dying is more than organ failure. It is the closing of a life, which is defined in the largest sense by our relationships. Our more recent publications have focused on the effect of these experiences on loved ones and on the process of bereavement. And we published 2 papers involving about 750 family members, loved ones. And I don't want to go into much detail except to say that what's good for the patient is good for their loved ones. How you witness somebody leaving absolutely affects your grief process. And if it's a comforting pre-death experience for the patient, as is for the loved ones. And we actually used measures of grief following these folks, and it was actually quantifiable, the effect of these experiences. They helped with their overall grief, the acceptance of loss, working through their pain, and connecting and bonding with their loved ones. Again, it changes dying from something that's empty and devoid of meaning or value versus something that can be rich and, again, affirming. And I'll let some folks tell their tale. This is Norb.
She started like chanting, I'm going home, I'm going home, over and over and over again. And that's kept up almost all afternoon. I'd give her a drink or something, bring her bed up, and as I brought her bed up, her head would go up and still stare at the ceiling real hard. About, I'll say right around 3 o'clock, I said to her, what are you staring at so hard up there? She says, it's the angels. They're coming down to take me home to heaven. And those were the last words that I ever heard her speak. She was total content. She had been fighting cancer for about 13 years prior to that there. And I knew that now she was at total ease. She's done. She that it was the end, and she realized that she was happy that she was going.
And how does
She
that
was-
make you feel?
It put me at ease also, knowing that. It's been hard at times to grieve her loss, but knowing how she died, what mood she was in when she died, has put me at great ease over it, really.
Now, do you think, often about that experience? Do you ever revisit
Oh yes,
it?
oh yes, I think of it there a lot, and still, how I can hear her chanting over and over and over again. It's made me feel at ease, knowing that she was at ease when she died. It wasn't that she was suffering or anything. She was happy that she was going, and the angels were coming to get her. Definitely has been ease as far as my grieving over her loss, knowing that, hey, that she was at ease when she died. Who do I want to dream of? Her waiting for me up at the gate. She's the love of my life, and I want to be back with her.
Is there anything else you would like medical professionals who take care of people who are dying to know about these experiences?
I think it's a field that really should be looked into deeply. That it's something that affects everybody. It affects everybody differently. The person that's losing somebody it affects, as well as the person that goes. And what their feelings are at the time has a great effect on the survivors, so as to speak. And to know that they went out happy, in a good mood, not suffering, hey, that's the main thing.
There's this tendency to romanticize or even sensationalize the words of the dying. Books have been written about it. Yet the end-of-life experiences are rarely of a deep philosophic or religious nature, or include great epiphanies or insights, punchlines. Often the richness in the dying process, the connectivity between and across lives, is often found within memories of simple but often symbolic everyday events, such as the making of spaghetti sauce. And this is one of my favorite videos. This is Jennifer talking about the final days of her significant other.
So this is the one and only picture that exists of Patrick and I that was snapped by my niece at a wedding, because neither one of us are overly photogenic and it just wasn't our style. And this picture, because we did not live together, we each owned our own home, went back and forth for 15 years on each other's mantles. Patrick didn't cook, with one single exception of making his grandmother's sauce, which he did, I want to say, about every 4, 6, 8 weeks through the entire 16 years I knew him. Patrick was the only member of his family that knows how to make the sauce. And for all the years I knew him, he insisted something was missing.
After his grandmother had passed?
After she had passed, and she had passed well before I had ever met him. I even tried to help him make it once, and I got banned from the kitchen because he insisted that an Irish woman was no way could ever make old-fashioned Italian sauce like Grandma used to make. Fast forward to, this would be the Sunday before he passed. He woke up in the morning, and I couldn't get him to eat. He wasn't hungry, total loss of appetite. And I'm like, baby, we got to make you something for breakfast. What do you want? He goes, I'm full. I said, Pat, you had a snack pack pudding yesterday. You're not full. And he's like, oh, no, I ate with Nana Dolores last night. As real as I'm sitting here, he believed he made sauce with his grandmother the night before, said he could smell it, he could still taste it, he was full from it, And she showed him, after all these years, what he had done wrong, which is the very last step before you take it off the burner was to add a teaspoon of sugar. It was so very real for him, to the point, there I am, putting on sweatpants, driving to the grocery store, because we spent the next 7.5 hours, because that's how long it takes, making his grandmother's sauce that day. So, and he was so sick, and it was the only day I was ever allowed to help him. As he sat on the bar stool, and, well, let's say was very strict with the orders of the sauce, and we kept bringing the pot over, so there are certain things only he could do. We made the sauce, he added the sugar. Last time Patrick ever ate. Every morning he woke up saying, "Is today the day I'm going to die?" And I said, "You'll go when you're ready." And he was ready.
He was ready. And you knew he was ready.
And I knew he was ready from this.
Yeah.
I think this is a man who is at peace and very honest. If your last dream in life is about spaghetti sauce, there's nothing more peaceful than that. It didn't appear to be a memory. To him, it appeared that he was participating. And that's one of the things I found very different.
Did that dream help you accept that reality further?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. And not only the reality that he is gone, it's made me think of maybe there is something out there after we go.
I keep describing these experiences as therapeutic and comforting, but they're really so much more than that. They are informing. And one of the things that we're challenged with is obviously people go through a dying process or a closing of a life very differently depending on their age. 90-year-old dies very differently, let's say, than a young parent who has an unfinished life and people who are still dependent on them. And what's remarkable in these experiences is there are patients for whom we can't reach as a clinical team, but they're having experiences, inner dialogues that are informing in a way that gets them to a point of acceptance and understanding that we can't. And that's the case of this next young patient named Sierra.
Sierra was a 28-year-old African-American woman. She was diagnosed with colon cancer after what seemed like far too long between the presentation of her symptoms and the actual diagnosis. So she went for many months undiagnosed. By the time she was diagnosed, her cancer was already too far advanced to really make an impact or extend her life.
Sierra was very determined to do absolutely everything she could to fight her disease for her son, for her fiance, and for her family.
She was clearly not in the mindset of a dying person. She had little to no insight, at least insight that she would admit to, of the fact that she was nearing the end of life or even heading towards the end of her life.
Her family was not at all ready to see her go. They loved her and they wanted her to fight this as well.
After we had a meeting, a very touching meeting, where the son finally put words to what was the experience in the room, and that is the question, is my sister going to die? At that point, we decided that we better move the meeting into Sierra's room.
We all gathered together with Sierra, her mom, her stepdad, her siblings, and her care team here at the hospice inpatient unit. Dr. Farrell was with her, speaking to her, trying to explain to her what we were no longer able to do for her medically.
During that time, what happened was something most profound, and that was that Sierra actually engaged her predeceased grandfather right in the room.
It happens every single time I talk about it. I get goosebumps, I get this sense of amazement and emotion to be there with someone when they experienced a vision like that. She saw her grandfather.
Afterwards, Sierra's mother said, "What did he say?" And he said, "I'm very proud of you. You are a wonderful granddaughter. You are a wonderful daughter. You are a wonderful mother." As the conversation was going on, Tammy asked Sierra, "What is he saying to you now?" He's saying, "I'm going to see you soon, and everything is going to be okay." At that point, Tammy said, "Listen to your grandfather." And it was at that point, really, that the family knew that Sierra's time was limited.
It was probably less than a week after that vision that she was able to let go and she passed. If we discount end-of-life dreams and visions, we're doing a disservice to our patients, to their families, and how they are able to not only experience the loss of a loved one, but how they then are able to grieve later.
I think she gained the comfort that she needed, not to give up, but to be at peace and let whatever was going to happen. I think her grandfather being there, of course, made it a lot more comforting for her. I think had Sierra not had those visions, I think she would have been more frightened. I think she may not have had that, I don't want to say easiness, but that I think she would have been more compelled to vocalize how frightened she was. But knowing that he was there for her, it made it very much easier for me, because I knew she would have him to be with and he would take care of her. It does help me process the loss, because I believe they visit us, both of them. You know, I think, you know, things happen for a reason. And yeah, she's not in pain anymore, and she's back to her healthy, playful, joyful self, you know. And he's there to watch over her as he did here. When it comes to dealing with patients who have these experiences, is not to dismiss their feelings and what they are relaying to you, what they've seen, who they're speaking with, because it's real. It's not, in my opinion, it's real. To them, it's real.
Well, I think I'm going to stop there so we have lots of time, I hope, for our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kerr. First, I want to give you a little round of American Sign Language applause, because I know it is 8:30 there. So you held the energy. That was absolutely incredible, the insights that you shared with us. And sort of magical just to sit in the reality that we have this beautiful committee of people and animals and loved ones waiting to greet us, and we can smell them again and hear them again and be in company with them again. Is I know this is research, but it's also, to me, just magical to hear these stories. We did receive 2 questions.
Yes.
So I would love to read those first, and then I'm glad to open up the floor to anybody else who would like to ask anything. So the 2 individuals who put the questions in chat earlier, if you would like to unmute yourself and share aloud, or I'm happy to read them. I'll give you a minute. All right, I'll read the first one. Did you find any differences in the type of frequencies of the visions or dreams that people had who may be identified as spiritual or otherwise open to different realms of consciousness versus those who did not identify as spiritual?
Oh, that's great. I can't answer that accurately. Normally the question I get, did I notice a difference based on religious beliefs or affiliation? And we ask that. The problem is that it's not necessarily accurate, and it's degrees of. So somebody, for example, may have been raised Catholic, but are they actually practicing? So actually capturing someone's belief system is pretty difficult. I can tell you there are an awful lot of people who are pretty startled because they weren't open or aware of it. And so I think it comes to them in the same way. I think one thing that's interesting is I certainly see people who are very creative and opening doing this in pretty vibrant and interesting ways, like children do. And I think that they're much more open to obviously the accepting of it, but I don't think anyone's denied.
Beautiful, thank you. And then the other question that came in, if you could talk a little bit to the length of stay of some of the individuals featured. This individual said the subjects in your videos appear to be very physically comfortable. So does that make a difference how long they're on hospice care? Does that affect their overall mood or visions?
Yeah, certainly, I think it does. I think that physical discomfort is something that's much more anticipated than it is real. I know for us, the more problematic symptom issues are confusional states, kind of existential issues, that sort of thing, rather than physical pain. There's some data that actually the medications for physical pain go down towards the end of life. I think the bigger issue is that is making sure that these sort of experiences are understood in a way that they're not medicated and people aren't sterilized from their own experience. I can tell you that it's a great question. There were people who made deliberate decisions to have medication, particularly at night, because to die is to sleep progressively and well, and you have to be relieved from not just physical pain, but psychogenic pain. And there were people for whom these experiences were so intense that it disrupted their sleep. So there's a guy in the book, and he was hilarious. I saw him he was very gruff, and he demanded to see the doctor in the morning. And what he said was, "It was great to see my Uncle Eddie, but I wish he'd shut up." Because the pull to sleep is so great in the dying process, and anything that impedes it is problematic. So I've had patients ask for medicine so that they could sleep better, and I've also had people who then would wake up and say, I really miss the experience. Generally, what we hear is they're having this kind of foot in both worlds. And as you heard kind of with Florence, if you gave her a choice between our shared reality and the one she had, or the gentleman who's talking about his wife, Horace, they want to go where that is. And again, this idea of trying to get towards, not against, is issue. But I think that's a great question. I think that I'm sure that we do extinguish a lot of it when we use high doses of medicine for pain. And I think that the people in our study who didn't report events, I'm not so sure they weren't experiencing them. We just couldn't access them in the same way. So,
Thank you. It sounds like some people are ready for parties, but then you got the other foot in the nap side.
yeah, absolutely.
And it looks like Gretchen B, did you have your hand up? Oh, no, okay, perfect. So if anybody has a question they would like to unmute themselves and share, or you could put it in the chat. Let's see, we just received a long question. Michelle, do you want to unmute yourself and share, or would you like me to read? All right, I'll read this one aloud. So it says, my brother visited me in a dream after he passed with AIDS. I was having another dream that I now see as probably showing survivor guilt. All of a sudden, it was interrupted, and there he was sitting in front of me. He looked me directly in the eyes, and he told me this was his thing, not mine. He was firm about his message. He said he was fine and everything was okay. I felt he gave me permission to get on with my life and to experience joy again. Do you hear things like this often?
yeah, so we did that study by accident. This is kind of an odd story. So we have a research department, and sometimes I don't pause long enough to properly explain things. I had a graduate student. We were sending out a survey basically, and we meant to ask the bereaved about the dream experiences of their loved one. And instead he sent the survey out and was asking about, and worded it wrong, was asking about their dream. And so we unintentionally asked bereaved people about their dream, and it was absolutely fascinating. So first of all, it's extremely common, and the theme and content, there's real patterns, and it's exactly how it was just described. So they often appear, and there's not a lot said. They appear in relative health, and the message seems to be, I'm okay. And the bereaved person who experiences this is comforted or relieved and allowed to go on. And I think that's really important because, and this got a lot of notice in the counseling literature, because if you think of how many people go with grief-related issues, mood secondary to grief and loss, and yet I don't think we ask this question. And it's one of those things that I think it's important to validate. You know, yes, this is common, and this is how you're made feel. So that's exactly what he just described was exactly what we found in our paper.
So it's sort of serendipitous that you asked it by mistake.
Oh, isn't that funny? Yeah, and it's funny because I was so annoyed at myself for screwing it up, and then we started to get these results, hundreds of them. I have these dreams, and this is what happened. And then what we did is we gave people the option of being interviewed if they wanted to, and a number of them wanted to be interviewed. So we got a lot of good information from an accidental study.
Is that something that you think you might explore further beyond the one accidental question?
Yeah, you know, we've been really, I probably should. It's a really good question. That you've given me something to think about. Yeah, we should. I'm always reluctant to go into that area because I don't feel qualified clinically to talk about bereavement and that sort of stuff. So where we really tried to focus, you know, this whole area is problematic because you can expand it into paranormal, religious, afterlife, and we were really, really careful just to stay on this side of the fence and to translate the actual experiences of the patient without trying to interpret. So I've always tried to stay in this very tight lane because one of our real goal was to validate these experiences and to have them contextualized or clinically recognized. And so we were careful not to go towards people's to open it to critique. We just wanted to honor the patient.
I think the firsthand videos did an excellent job of really, you know, they're speaking their own truth, and to know that what they're saying is factual, you could actually take that and share it with the community, and we could hear straight from them.
They're pretty undeniable. Yeah.
Let me check the chat out real quick. So we've gotten quite a few. Thank you very much. And let's see, we have one. You are changing lives with this work. I think we
Oh,
all need to
thank
hear
you.
more positivity, so I wanted to make sure to highlight all of that.
Thank you very much.
Let's see here. I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions, so give me all a second. Someone said this is even more impactful than the first time they heard you.
I'm sorry if I sound redundant. I should use other videos. I just wasn't expecting. Yeah.
Oh no, and I should say I watched your presentation previously as well, and the emotions that I experienced watching the firsthand, sharings this time was so different than the first time.
Oh,
so I
that's
think
nice to hear.
sometimes we need the opportunity to kind of sit in someone's story.
Yeah, I mean,
longer.
they're so moving, right? And they're powerful, and it's an awful lot to process, I think.
I would agree, but it's a beautiful thing to process. All right, give me a couple minutes to read these. Let's see. And I will save the chat because there's a lot of nice notes in here. I know you're multitasking already. Let's see. So somebody said in the weeks before his passing, my brother used to wake from naps and see his favorite Star Trek characters in the room with him. He would look at me and then look at him.
Oh, isn't that funny? There's a gentleman I described in the book who kind of never came out of the 70s, and his favorite thing was Star Trek and concerts he had gone to. And his dying days, he kept going back and he kept revisiting the best concerts that he ever went to.
Oh, I love that. It sounds like such a joyful opportunity. So let's see. A lot of thank yous and continue this important work. It's great to see this continuing on from last time people have had the opportunity to hear you speak. We haven't received any other questions, though. We have about 10 more minutes if anybody wants to share a question, either aloud or in the chat.
Or an experience. I always get so much out of hearing people just sharing what they've witnessed.
Do we have any takers? I would love to hear anyone's firsthand experience as well. I know we have people in the room who have sat at bedside. We did receive another question. So it says, why do you call these visions or dreams rather than experiences?
Yeah, I thank you. We actually are writing a paper that addresses that. It's kind of a toolkit. It'll be published soon that talks about kind of how to educate staff around this, and it goes at this question of nomenclature. Honestly, we started it because we didn't understand what we were dealing with. We got it wrong. We talked about dreams and visions, and it's really important. When in our study, 50% of the time people said they were awake for these experiences. And what's interesting is that when you go in the room, I'm pretty convinced that half the time they're not awake when they're experiencing. We're not walking in on people commonly, it happens, but experiencing these like this. And one of the interpretations is that sleep architecture is pretty much scrambled as people die. They're kind of in and out, and maybe what their experience is vivid dreaming that feels like wakefulness. But I agree that they really should be called end-of-life experiences, because if we're to do justice by our patients, they're so adamant that these aren't dreams. And when you heard Jennifer talking the story about the sauce, she went out of her way to say that this didn't feel like a memory to him or to her. It felt like it actually transpired. And so I think by calling them, I think we're doing it a disservice by calling them dreams.
The next time we have you, it'll be death is but an experience.
That's a good idea.
And then I do have a question that just popped into my head. I'm wondering, when you were working with people, did you ever ask them while they were on hospice in advance of these visions, who would you like to see at your end of life? And did that kind of conspire? Were they able to kind of plant the seed of, I want to see my brother and my mom? And then that actually happened.
I never have asked. I never wanted to I'd be guilty of suggestibility, I think, or intrusion, but we get an awful lot of people who say, I can't wait to see, and they'll say, or they'll be able to almost prognosticate off of it. Our first patient who said, but I think she said in the video clip, I'm not sure which clip we had, about that, I haven't seen my dog yet, and or my husband, and in fact she ended up seeing both, which was really interesting. So if people have witnessed this in their life, like so many people have here, I think they go into their own dying process informed, and some people are really excited to reconnect with whomever. It's very interesting.
Thank you. And we do have another question that just came in. It's a longer one, so I'll read through the whole thing. Does it say anything when nothing is spoken by somebody dying? My brother and mom recently passed and were unconscious, so I didn't get to speak to them and they couldn't speak to me. I wish so much any part of them was present, even for a minute, for those who loved them could feel what so many of your examples are experiencing once they are gone. So there's no question in that. It's just somebody's experience.
I share that sentiment exactly. I think it's or people who have acute death, or death while fully sedated. Again, I think there's important work. I'm not willing to say though that that there isn't something else that is being experienced. You obviously can't prove it. I mean, you even think of George Floyd, who knew he was being traumatized. He may not, aware of death, but what were his last words? His mother. The notion that your life flashes before you in an instant, when you're, when there's threat to life. So I'm not sure what's experienced and what's not. I wouldn't discount it. I wrote an article on this during the pandemic, is this idea of people being alone and isolated. And I really don't think we're defined by our final days and moments. Life is not written by its last page. And I'm not so sure. I think they leave us less alone than we think.
Oh, I love that so much. And we did have somebody else write in with their own experience. So it says, when my mom was dying, she kept looking in the corner of the room. I asked her if she could see my dad, and she said, almost. Oh, that's beautiful, Ruth.
Yeah, that's that's obviously, when you've seen it, right? I'm sure there's an abundance of people here who've seen people open their eyes, that very distant stare, almost looking through you. The point is their focus is on something else that we don't have access to. One of my favorite patients, and she's in one of the films and she's featured in the book. Her mother died when she was 12 or 13, and she always wanted to know if she would approve of who she was. She never got to say goodbye to her. And actually her last moment was she was in a hospital. It was a time when children weren't allowed in the room, and was trying to show her a report card which had A's on it. So she'd lived with this her whole life. And at the end of her life, she stared off and asked her and if that was her mom, and she shook her head and she smiled. But that you know it when you've seen it.
We only have 3 more minutes, so I'll read one more experience, and then Dr. Chris, if you want to leave us with any final messages, or if there's anything of your own work, like the article, for example, you just mentioned, that you want to talk about now. So let me read this last one. I had a patient moments before he died tell me his 2 dogs, who had died years apart, were there on the bed with him. He knew they were walking alongside him on his journey. He kept petting the bed, so happy they were there. Thank you, Gabby.
Yeah, that was great. So we in one of our studies, we asked people, there was a menu list of items they could click off of what they were seeing. and I believe pets were in almost 40%. And and maybe I'll leave you with this. I think what's fascinating in that is that what I tried to stress in the presentation was we absolutely edit who comes to us. So I've seen people who've had 3 husbands, they really love number 2, and that person came. 1 parent, not another. 2 siblings, not the 3rd. And this idea that the people who we need to connect to, their love was unconditional, or people that we've loved unconditionally, purely. And animals are clearly that. And I just love the fact that I see it all the time. You know, you could be 88 years old and it's that dog from your childhood that's very, very much there. Again, it is so common. It's I think it's close to 40% of people experience a pet. And it could be from any point in their life.
Beautiful. Well, I know we're talking about death tonight, but I think there's so much about living and so much about loving in this, and to know those people that come back to you, it's that unconditional love. It's heartwarming to hear, and I appreciate you coming in tonight and sharing all of these amazing experiences and really allowing our brains to wander into this realm that hasn't been explored too much. And it's so beautiful to sit in that and know that this isn't the end of living and this isn't the end of life. And we've made so many beautiful connections that full circle come back to us again. So thank you so much for your time and
thank you.
All of your sharing tonight. And thank you everybody in the room for joining and for all of your beautiful comments and stories in the chat. I appreciate all of you as well.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful night, everybody.